You were not created to live in fear. You were not placed on this earth to merely survive, to scrape by, or to live dependent on unstable systems. You are here to walk in divine abundance, to live fully, to thrive, because God is your source, not the economy. The moment we recognize that God is our true source, not the economy, everything changes. It is a shift in consciousness that redefines how we view money, provision, success, and security. For most people, their sense of well-being is tied to the condition of their job, their investments, or the state of the world economy. But this kind of mindset is built on shifting sand. Economies rise and fall, companies downsize, markets crash. Even the most stable industries can be disrupted. If your peace and sense of security are tied to these unstable systems, you will live in a constant state of anxiety. But when you realize that God, not the economy, is your provider, you tap into a supply chain that never breaks down, never weakens, and never runs out. The economy is merely a system through which provision may flow. It is a channel. It is not the source. Your job, your business, your clients, your paycheck, these are all channels. But channels can dry up, be redirected, or change form. When one channel closes, God opens another. He's not limited to what you see in front of you. He's not scrambling when the economy shifts. He doesn't need the stock market to align for you to be blessed. His supply is not governed by the world's financial systems. His provision comes from a higher dimension, a spiritual economy that is unaffected by human conditions. And when you understand this truth, fear loses its grip on you. Most people look at their circumstances and say, I can't make it because the economy is down, or business is slow, inflation is up, and everything is getting worse. That kind of thinking places all your hope in an external system. It turns the economy into an idol, something you believe has power over your destiny. But the truth is, no man-made system has the authority to determine your outcome when you are aligned with God's promises. Scripture teaches, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." That means your needs are met, not because of what's happening in the natural, but because of who you are connected to in the spiritual. Think of the Israelites in the wilderness. There were no banks, no crops, no visible economy, yet every day they received fresh manna from heaven. Water flowed from a rock. They lacked nothing. Why? Because their source wasn't the land, it was the Lord. When they trusted Him, they were sustained in the most unlikely circumstances. And the same is true for you today. You don't need ideal market conditions to prosper. You need faith in the God who provides in and out of season. Now, this does not mean that you sit back and do nothing. It means you stop depending solely on the work of your hands and start trusting in the favor of God. It means you act in faith with the understanding that your efforts are blessed by an invisible hand that guides and multiplies. God uses natural means to bring about supernatural outcomes. He can cause your resume to stand out. He can bring clients to your doorstep. He can put your name in rooms you've never entered. But it starts with the belief that He is the source behind it all. When you see God as your source, your anxiety over money begins to dissolve. You don't panic when bills show up. You don't spiral when business slows down. Instead, you go to the one who provides. You pray with confidence. You expect with faith. You move with boldness, because you know that your future isn't limited by human systems. It's anchored in divine supply. That awareness becomes your strength. It becomes your peace. It becomes your strategy. There's a danger in placing your trust in economic systems. These systems are built by men. They are controlled by policies, corporations, markets, and agendas that shift constantly. And when you tie your identity or your peace to them, you become subject to every wave that moves through the financial world. One headline can destroy your confidence. One downturn can steal your hope. That is not how you were designed to live. You were created to live by faith, not fear. You were created to live by promises, not prediction. God's economy is not reactive. It doesn't depend on GDP, inflation, or currency values. He fed thousands with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He brought water out of dry places. He used ravens to feed prophets. These are not metaphors. They are demonstrations of how God's provision is not tied to the world's systems. And if he could do it then, he can do it now. The channel may look different, but the source remains unchanged. And once you embrace this truth, you'll stop trying to force open doors God has already replaced. You'll stop worrying about how it will happen and start trusting in who makes it happen. When your mindset shifts from "I need the economy to improve" to "I trust God to provide," you begin to operate in spiritual power. You become unshaken by the news. You become immune to panic, not because you're disconnected from reality, but because you're grounded in a greater reality, the truth of divine provision. The peace that comes from knowing God is your source is not fragile. It doesn't depend on external confirmation. It lives deep within you and flows out as confidence, clarity, and calm. This way of thinking isn't just spiritual, it's practical. It helps you make wiser decisions because you're not acting from fear. It helps you spot opportunities others miss because you're guided by the Spirit, not trends. It allows you to be generous even when others are hoarding, and that generosity opens new channels of provision because you've proven that money doesn't control you. You control it through faith. Don't be discouraged by what you see in the economy. Don't let statistics or forecasts define your future. The news may be real, but it is not the truth. Truth is higher than fact. And the truth is, you are connected to an unlimited source. You are not forgotten. You are not helpless. You are not dependent on a broken system. You are a child of God, and your supply comes from heaven. That truth will guide you, sustain you, and elevate you, regardless of what happens in the world around you. Provision begins in the spiritual realm long before it becomes visible in the physical. Everything that exists in the material world was first conceived in thought, intention, or unseen potential. Before a building is constructed, there is a blueprint. Before a harvest is gathered, seeds are planted. In the same way, your abundance, your opportunities, and your financial breakthroughs begin as spiritual realities. To manifest them, you must first align with the unseen truth that God is your source and that His supply is limitless. People often look at their circumstances and say, "I don't see any way out," or "there's no opportunity in sight," but they fail to understand that the most powerful things are not seen with the eyes. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Just because you don't see the door doesn't mean it isn't opening. Just because you can't trace how the provision will come doesn't mean it isn't already being prepared. God works behind the scenes, in realms you cannot touch, arranging the pieces, aligning the timing, and making ways in the wilderness. The spiritual realm operates by different laws than the natural world. In the physical, people rely on effort, hustle, logic, and numbers. But in the spiritual, things move by belief, spoken word, alignment, and obedience. The key to unlocking divine provision isn't striving harder, it's believing deeper. When you believe that provision has already been made, when you act as though it's already in motion, you draw it into your experience. You are not waiting for something to be created. You are simply calling into manifestation what already exists in the unseen. This is why it's essential to train your spiritual senses. You must become more attuned to faith than to fear, more aligned with divine promises than worldly predictions. The economy may say you are headed for loss, but God says He is your provider. Your job may say you've reached the cap, but God says He opens doors no man can shut. There are blessings that exist in the spirit realm with your name on them, but you must rise in consciousness to receive them. You cannot walk in abundance while thinking in lack. You cannot receive from the Spirit while living anchored only in the material. When provision is spiritual first, your prayers become powerful. You're not begging for scraps or asking for barely enough. You're accessing a treasury that already exists. You're not hoping that something might happen. You're declaring that it will. This is the difference between worldly wishing and spiritual knowing. Wishing doubts, knowing acts. And when you move in knowing, heaven responds. God honors faith. He honors those who dare to believe that what He has promised is already there. Provision is also released through divine ideas. God doesn't always drop money from the sky, but He will drop an idea into your spirit that leads to abundance. He will give you insight, wisdom, or strategy that positions you for increase. But again, it starts in the unseen. That moment of inspiration, that nudge to try something new, that inner prompting to reach out or start again, that is how provision begins. It doesn't always look like a financial breakthrough at first. Sometimes it looks like clarity, or courage, or a decision. And when you act on what you receive spiritually, you unlock the flow of supply in the natural. People miss provision because they only look for the material. They pray for money, but ignore the inspired idea that would generate it. They ask for favor, but reject the prompting that requires faith. They want immediate visible results, but God often works by planting seeds. Those seeds must be received, nurtured, and acted upon. The harvest doesn't come before the seed. It comes after belief and action have partnered with divine timing. This is why gratitude plays such a crucial role. When you thank God in advance, you're acknowledging that the answer already exists. You're aligning with the reality that supply is not created when you pray, it is accessed when you believe. Gratitude tunes your heart to the frequency of faith. It tells your spirit it is done, even when your eyes see nothing. And when you live from that place of trust, provision begins to flow more freely. There's also a supernatural timing to provision. You may think something is late, but in the spirit it is right on time. Delay does not mean denial. Just because you haven't seen the answer yet, doesn't mean it's not on its way. What's being worked out in the unseen is often far greater than what you originally expected. God's timing is perfect. He sees what you can't. He knows what's best for you. And sometimes the wait is a form of protection. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's positioning. But it is never a sign of abandonment. Living from the awareness that provision begins in the spiritual changes, how you pray, how you move, and how you expect. You begin to speak life into your finances. You stop rehearsing defeat. You stop aligning your language with lack. Instead, you declare truth. All my needs are met. Provision is flowing to me. Divine opportunities are locating me now. These are not empty affirmations. They are spiritual activations. Your words carry power, and when they align with faith, they unlock heaven's resources. Provision is not about striving harder. It's about believing deeper. It's about recognizing that you are a spiritual being with access to divine inheritance. When you connect with that truth, the world around you begins to shift. Resources come. People show up. Breakthroughs happen. But it all starts within. Your internal world must be aligned with abundance before the external world reflects it. You don't receive what you want. You receive what you believe. You receive what you expect. You receive what you are spiritually aligned with. You may not see it yet. You may not know how it will come, but don't let that stop you. Keep your heart open. Keep your spirit expectant. Keep declaring truth. Keep sowing in faith. Keep thanking God in advance. Because in the spiritual realm, your provision is already established. It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. And when you understand that provision is spiritual first, you stop chasing money and start attracting it. You stop striving and start receiving. You stop fearing and start flowing. Provision exists. It's already assigned. It's already waiting. And your faith is the bridge that brings it from the unseen into the seen. So rise in belief, walk in expectation, and know that what's being prepared in the spirit will soon manifest in your life. The spirit of lack is not simply the absence of money or material possessions. It is a deeply rooted mindset that distorts how we perceive ourselves, our circumstances, and God's provision. It whispers lies, that there is never enough, that you are not worthy of abundance, and that your needs will always outweigh your supply. It conditions you to believe that struggle is permanent, that wealth is reserved for others, and that you must hustle, strive, and compete for scraps. But this spirit is not from God. It is rooted in fear, and fear is the enemy of faith. To walk in divine abundance, you must first confront and break the spirit of lack that seeks to keep you small, insecure, and doubtful. Lack is not just physical, it begins in the mind. A person can have money and still be ruled by lack. They can live in a big house, drive a luxury car, and still constantly fear that it could all disappear. That fear leads to hoarding, anxiety, stinginess, and suspicion. True abundance isn't measured by possessions, it's measured by the freedom in your spirit and the peace in your heart. When you believe that God is your source, and that His supply is infinite, the fear of lack begins to lose its grip on you. You stop living in panic and start living in trust. The world trains people to think in terms of scarcity. You hear it in conversations. There's not enough to go around. Times are tough. Money doesn't grow on trees. These phrases may sound harmless, but they plant seeds of limitation in the mind. Over time, those seeds grow into beliefs, and those beliefs shape behavior. You begin to say no to opportunities because they feel too risky. You hold back from giving because you fear you won't have enough left. You settle for less because you don't believe more is possible. But the truth is, lack is not your portion. You were created in the image of an abundant God who owns all resources, knows no limitation, and delights in blessing His children. To break the spirit of lack, you must begin by identifying where it lives in your life. Is it in your thoughts, your words, your actions? Every time you say, "I can't afford that," or "I'll never get ahead," you are reinforcing the chains of limitation. The first step in breaking them is to challenge the internal dialogue that supports them. Instead of saying, "I can't," begin to say, "God can." Instead of saying, "There's not enough," declare, "There's always more where that came from." These are not empty affirmations. They are spiritual corrections. They rewire your thinking to align with divine truth. Lack often masquerades as humility. People are taught that to desire more is greedy, or that living with little is noble. But there is nothing holy about poverty when it's driven by fear. God never intended for His children to barely survive. He promised abundance, not for the sake of vanity, but for the sake of purpose. When you are blessed, you can be a blessing. When you are free from financial fear, you can serve more, give more, and live more fully. Breaking the spirit of lack isn't about chasing wealth. It's about removing the chains that keep you from your God-ordained freedom. Another powerful way to break the spirit of lack is through giving. It may seem counterintuitive, but giving is one of the most spiritual acts of defiance against fear. Lack says, "Hold tightly." Faith says, "Release it and trust God to multiply it." When you give, you declare that money does not control you. You prove to yourself and to God that your heart is not bound by materialism. Giving loosens the grip of fear and opens the flow of provision. It doesn't have to be large. It just has to be obedient. Whether it's money, time, encouragement, or resources, giving shifts your mindset from scarcity to abundance. Lack is also broken by renewing your sense of identity. If you see yourself as someone who is always struggling, always behind, always at the bottom, you will unconsciously act in ways that confirm that image. But when you begin to see yourself as a beloved child of God, highly favored, abundantly supplied, and walking in divine alignment, your choices begin to change. You stop settling for less. You stop accepting defeat. You start expecting good. Your posture shifts from desperation to confidence, not arrogance but assurance in the one who provides. Fear of lack creates tension. It makes you anxious, impatient, and reactive. You make decisions out of fear instead of faith. You chase things that aren't for you, because you believe you must grab what you can while it lasts. But when you're led by trust, you operate differently. You pause, you pray, you wait. You allow things to unfold with peace, because you know your supply doesn't depend on chance. It depends on a faithful God who sees your needs before you even speak them. This transformation is not instant. Breaking the spirit of lack is a daily practice. It's about renewing your mind constantly with truth. It's about speaking life when lack tries to scream. It's about standing in faith when circumstances look empty. And yes, it's about rejecting the world's narrative of scarcity and choosing to live by the laws of divine provision. Every time you say there is more than enough, you strike a blow against lack. Every time you choose to give instead of hoard, you disrupt the spirit of fear. Every time you trust God instead of obsessing over numbers, you expand your capacity to receive. These daily acts of faith compound over time, reshaping your reality from the inside out. It's important to understand that breaking the spirit of lack is not just about material outcomes. It's about stepping into a deeper relationship with God as provider. When you truly know that He is the one who meets your needs, provides your answers, and multiplies your resources, your heart becomes settled. You move with peace, not panic. You walk with purpose, not pressure. You give without fear and you receive without guilt. The abundance of God is not reserved for a special few. It is available to all who align with Him in faith. But to experience it fully, the spirit of lack must be cast out. It cannot coexist with faith. It cannot thrive where truth is spoken, and it cannot remain in a heart that is fully surrendered to the belief that God is more than enough. So, every day, choose to believe in divine sufficiency. Speak words that build your faith, not feed your fear. Give even when it stretches you. Think expansively. Act boldly. Expect favor. And know that lack is not your identity. You are not defined by your past, your paycheck, or your possessions. You are defined by your connection to an infinite source who delights in your well-being, cares for your needs, and is fully capable of exceeding your expectations. When the spirit of lack is broken, you don't just gain money, you gain freedom. You gain peace. You gain the ability to live with open hands and an open heart, fully trusting in the one who never runs out. Giving is not merely a financial transaction. It is a spiritual principle that activates divine multiplication. The world teaches us to hold tightly, to preserve what we have, and to measure every act of generosity against our own lack or perceived limitations. But in the realm of the Spirit, the opposite is true. When you give freely, especially when it stretches your faith, you open the floodgates of divine provision. Giving is not losing, it is planting, and every seed sown in faith returns multiplied, not always in the form you expect, but always in the way you need. Many people misunderstand giving. They think of it only in terms of money, and often feel fear rise up when the topic is mentioned. But giving is far more than finances. It's a posture of the heart. It is the willingness to release what you have, trusting that God will provide what you need. Whether it's time, energy, love, encouragement, service, or resources, the principle remains the same. What you release in faith, God receives and multiplies. This law of divine multiplication is not man-made. It is spiritual. It is timeless. And it always works when activated with the right heart. The reason giving is so powerful is because it directly confronts the fear of lack. When you give, especially when it feels like you don't have much to spare, you are telling fear, "You don't rule me." You are telling your circumstances, "You are not my source." You are declaring to God, "I trust you above what I see." That is why giving is never just about the gift. It's about the faith behind it. It's about the alignment of your spirit with the nature of divine abundance. In the spiritual economy, giving is the gateway to receiving. Not because you are trying to manipulate God or purchase blessings, but because you are demonstrating a deep trust in His nature. God is generous. He is a giver, and when you mirror that nature, you become a vessel through which His provision flows. The more open your hands are, the more freely God can place blessings into them. But if your hands are clenched, gripping tightly to what you have, you are not in a position to receive the new things He wants to release. There is a divine law that says, "Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." This doesn't mean you give in order to get, but it does mean that giving initiates a spiritual chain reaction. The act of giving stirs the unseen. It creates space in your life for more. It signals to heaven that you are a conduit, not a container, that you can be trusted not only to receive blessings, but to release them to others. Too often, people withhold because they are waiting to have enough. They tell themselves, "I'll give when I have more. Once I'm financially secure, then I'll be generous." But that's not how spiritual principles work. The breakthrough doesn't come after you give. It comes because you give. The widow who gave her last meal didn't do it because she had abundance. She did it because she had, and her act of obedience became the catalyst for divine provision that sustained her beyond anything she could have imagined. Another powerful aspect of giving is that it removes the illusion of ownership. Everything we have, our money, our time, our abilities, ultimately belongs to God. We are stewards, not owners. When we hold tightly and claim possession over everything in our lives, we forget that it was God who provided it in the first place. But when we give, we're reminded that what flows through us is not ours to hoard, it is ours to steward. Giving teaches us to release control. It teaches us to let go of the false security that money often offers, and to anchor our trust in the one who provides the seed and the harvest. Giving also expands your capacity. The more you give, the more your spirit grows. Generosity stretches your faith. It enlarges your heart. It shifts your perspective from me to we. It lifts your eyes from your own needs and trains you to see the needs of others. And in that process, something beautiful happens. You begin to see the world through God's eyes. You start to understand that you are not here just to survive. You are here to bless, to serve, and to be part of a divine flow of provision and purpose. It's important to understand that giving must be done in the right spirit. It's not about guilt. It's not about impressing others. It's not about religious obligation. It's about joy, love, and faith. Scripture says that God loves a cheerful giver, not a pressured one. When you give joyfully, freely, and without expectation of return, you step into the purest form of spiritual alignment. You begin to give not just to meet needs, but because generosity has become your nature. And that kind of giving is powerful. It's transformative. It unlocks doors, shifts atmospheres, and brings supernatural breakthroughs. There are many forms of giving that carry divine impact. Sometimes it's financial support. Other times it's encouragement. At the exact moment someone is about to give up. Sometimes it's your time, listening to someone, helping them, being present. And sometimes it's giving someone a second chance, extending grace, or offering forgiveness. These acts of giving are seeds too, and they often yield the most profound returns. Peace, restoration, healing. The spiritual principle is always the same. When you release something with a pure heart, God multiplies it. Giving also breaks the spirit of entitlement. It reminds you that everything you have is a gift. When you live in that awareness, gratitude flows. You stop taking things for granted. You stop complaining about what you lack, and you start thanking God for what you've been entrusted with. Gratitude and giving go hand in hand. They feed each other. A grateful heart gives freely, and a giving heart lives in constant gratitude. When you live a life of giving, you begin to see that you are never truly empty. Even when you feel like you have little, there is always something to give. A kind word, a prayer, a moment of your time. And every time you give, no matter how small, heaven takes notice. God sees not just what you give, but the faith and love with which you give it. And he responds, not out of obligation, but out of his nature, which is to bless, to multiply, and to increase those who trust in him. Giving is an act of surrender, but it is also an act of power. It declares to your fear that you are not a victim of circumstance. It proclaims to the world that your supply does not end with what you see. It connects you to the greater flow of divine abundance that never runs dry. And most importantly, it aligns your heart with God's heart, full of generosity, compassion, and limitless provision. When you give in faith, you are not losing. You are sowing into a spiritual field that cannot fail to produce a harvest. And that harvest will come, often in ways you never expected, at times you never predicted, but always right on time. When one channel of provision closes, it is not the end of your supply. It is a redirection. It is a shift, not a shutdown. The channel may change, but the source remains the same. God is not dependent on one path to bless you. He is not limited to your job, your business, your contacts, or any one opportunity. Those are simply channels, vehicles through which his provision flows. But they are not the source itself. And the moment you begin to see them for what they are, temporary, flexible, movable, you will stop panicking when one dries up. You will begin to trust more in the source than the system. Most people confuse the two. They think their employer is their provider, or their business, their investment portfolio, their clients, or their talent. And so, when a job is lost, when a business slows, when the market shifts, they begin to spiral into fear. Their peace is shattered because their confidence was placed in a system rather than in the unshakable source behind it all. But provision was never meant to be tied to a single income stream. When you know that God is your source, you begin to expect abundance from anywhere, at any time. You begin to understand that he can use anything and anyone to bring what you need. Throughout history and scripture, we see this truth played out repeatedly. A brook dried up, but God sent a raven. A famine came, but he multiplied flour and oil. A crowd was hungry, but he used 5 loaves and 2 fish. Over and over, God demonstrates that he is not bound by visible resources. He is not confined to logic or linear thinking. He is the master of multiplication, the creator of divine detours, and the author of unexpected outcomes. Just because one channel ends, doesn't mean the supply ends. It simply means the supply is about to arrive, through a different means. This is where faith must rise. Faith is what allows you to move forward when the familiar dries up. Faith is what keeps you stable when the ground shifts beneath your feet. Faith is what whispers, something better is on the way, when everything around you screams lack. God is always moving, always working. What looks like a loss may be the exact redirection needed to position you for the next blessing. And if you mourn the loss of the channel too long, you may miss the new opportunity standing right in front of you. When your trust is in the channel, you become rigid. You try to preserve something God may be trying to move you from. You resist change, even when that change is the doorway to greater provision. But when your trust is in the source, you become flexible. You are open. You are adaptable. You recognize that the method may change, but the outcome, your provision, your increase, your destiny, is still secure in the hands of the one who never fails. This mindset frees you. It releases you from the pressure of trying to control every detail. You no longer panic when contracts fall through, when sales are slow, or when the familiar ends. Instead, you lean in. You listen. You trust. You begin to look with fresh eyes for where the new channel might be forming. Because one of the great truths of spiritual provision is this: where there is vision and faith, God always makes a way. Sometimes the shift in channels is not about loss at all, it's about growth. God may close one door to stretch you into something greater. A closed door may be his protection, his redirection, or even his promotion in disguise. If you only ever receive through one channel, you become dependent on that path. You limit what God can do, but when that path shifts, You are invited into a deeper relationship with the source. You are called to rely more on spiritual discernment than physical evidence. In this process, your spiritual maturity grows. You learn to recognize seasons. You learn to discern timing. You become more sensitive to divine nudges. And in the process, your faith is not only sustained, it is strengthened. You stop saying, "Why did this happen to me?" And you start saying, "What new door is God opening now?" That question alone shifts your energy. It moves you from victimhood to expectancy. And expectancy is the breeding ground for miracle. When one channel closes, it's often because you've outgrown it. Maybe you needed it for a season, but now God wants to stretch your capacity. Maybe it served its purpose, and now He's positioning you for expansion. Or maybe that channel has been blocking a better one. Something more aligned with your calling, your growth, your future. Whatever the reason, know this: God is not just the God of enough. He is the God of more than enough. And when He closes one flow, He is already preparing another. This is why gratitude is so vital, even in transitions. Being thankful for the closed channel honors the season it served you. It also opens your heart to receive the new. Gratitude keeps your spirit aligned with trust. It protects you from bitterness and fear, and it reminds you that every chapter, whether beginning or ending, is part of a bigger divine narrative that is always working for your good. Practically, this means you should always be ready for God to surprise you. Be open to new ideas. Be willing to shift. Stay sensitive to divine inspiration. Don't box yourself into one way of receiving. If God provided once, He will provide again. And often, He does it through unexpected places. An old contact might reappear. A random opportunity may emerge. A new gift or idea may rise within you. Pay attention. Stay aware. Keep your spirit open. What you call closed may only be closed in the natural. In the spirit, something else has already been released. But spiritual provision requires spiritual alignment. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to let go of the familiar so you can embrace the miraculous. It means walking by faith, not by sight. Even when the numbers don't add up. Even when the doors are closing. Even when you feel like you've run out of options. God's supply is not linear. It's not limited. It's not fragile. He is not scratching His head, trying to figure out how to provide for you. He already has a way prepared. Your job is to stay connected to Him, the source. To stay in expectancy. To move when He says move. To trust when you don't understand. And to believe that every ending is just the beginning of something greater. So when a channel closes, don't despair. Don't cling. Don't freeze in fear. Stand in faith. Remind yourself that the channel was never the source. It was simply one method God used to bring you what you needed. And if He did it before, He will do it again. Maybe differently, maybe through someone new, maybe in a way you never imagined. But the outcome is certain. Your needs will be met, your provision will arrive, and your journey will continue, because the source has not changed. Faith is the invisible force that bridges the gap between what is promised and what is seen. It is the key that unlocks the reality of divine abundance, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Faith doesn't require evidence. It creates it. It doesn't wait for confirmation from the world. It moves on the assurance of God's word. To live by faith means to anchor your heart, your thoughts, your expectations, and your actions in the truth that God's supply is real, present, and more than enough, regardless of what you see in your bank account or hear on the news. When you walk by faith, you are no longer a slave to the economy or limited by human systems. You operate in a realm where miracles are normal and provision is constant. Many people live in constant anxiety because their focus is on what they lack. They replay scarcity in their minds and rehearse worst-case scenarios. They check their finances obsessively, calculating every outcome through the lens of fear. But faith shifts your focus. Faith lifts your eyes from the numbers and puts them on the source. Faith says, God is able, even when the bills are mounting. Faith says, provision is on the way, even when every door seems closed. And this is not blind hope. It is spiritual certainty. It is the deep knowing that the same God who provided before will do it again, and again and again. Faith is not denial of facts. It is belief in higher truth. It doesn't ignore reality. It acknowledges that God's reality is greater. You may be facing a layoff, a mountain of debt, or a dry season in your business. Those are real, but faith declares that even in famine, you will be sustained, that even in drought, rivers can flow, that even in loss, God can restore. The facts may say you're in trouble, but faith says you're in transition. The facts may suggest you're stuck, but faith says you're being set up for something greater. One of the most powerful truths about faith is that it grows stronger in adversity. When everything is going well, it's easy to say you trust God, but true faith is proven in the fire. When things are uncertain, when the natural evidence says no, when the delay stretches on longer than expected, that's when faith digs deeper. That's when you decide to believe anyway, to worship anyway, to give anyway, to expect anyway. And in that space, something shifts. Heaven responds to persistent faith, not because you earn favor, but because faith aligns you with the frequency of God's supply. Faith doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean sitting still and hoping for the best. Real faith moves. It acts. It obeys. When God gives you an instruction, no matter how small or unusual, faith says yes. It might be to apply for a job that seems out of reach. It might be to sow a financial seed when you feel stretched. It might be to forgive someone, release an old burden, or speak boldly when you'd rather shrink back. Faith expresses itself in action. You cannot say you believe and then do nothing. If you trust the provision is coming, you make space for it. You prepare as though it's already on the way. Faith also has a voice. What you speak shapes what you see. When you declare words of doubt, fear, and frustration, you reinforce scarcity. But when you declare words of faith, you begin to shift your internal atmosphere. Speak what you want to see, not what you're afraid of. Say things like, resources are locating me now, or doors are opening in divine timing. This is not pretending. This is prophesying. This is activating a higher truth. Your words carry energy, and when aligned with faith, they attract favor, clarity, and opportunity. Fear often tries to mimic logic. It tells you not to expect too much, not to dream too big, not to believe for more. It wraps itself in caution and whispers, be realistic. But faith is not reckless. It's rooted in revelation. It's grounded in the promises of God. And those promises are not small. They speak of abundance, overflow, increase, peace, and provision. To walk in faith is to reject the limitations of human systems and step into the limitless supply of God. It is to live with a heart open to the unexpected, the miraculous, the impossible becoming possible. Faith transforms how you manage what you already have. When you operate in faith, you treat your current resources as seed, not shortage. You stop saying, this isn't enough, and you start saying, this is the beginning. You become a faithful steward, knowing that how you handle little determines your readiness for more. Faith teaches you that every resource has purpose, every opportunity has potential, and every act of obedience is building toward a breakthrough you may not yet see. Living by faith also protects your peace. When others are panicking about the economy, you remain calm. When the news is filled with fear, you remain anchored. Not because you're naive, but because you know who holds your future. Faith allows you to rest in the middle of storms. It lets you sleep while others worry. It gives you the boldness to walk into uncertainty with confidence, knowing that you are never alone and never without supply. There will always be temptations to revert back to fear, to shrink your vision, to limit your expectations. That's when you must feed your faith. Stay in the Word. Surround yourself with truth. Remind yourself daily of what God has already done in your life. Make a habit of gratitude, because thanksgiving fuels faith. The more you thank God for what you have, the more aware you become of His presence in your process. And the more aware you are of His presence, the easier it is to trust His provision. Faith is a journey, not a destination. It grows with use. It deepens over time, and it matures in trials. You won't always feel it. But faith is not a feeling. It's a decision. It is the daily choice to believe that God is good, that He is for you, and that He will provide in ways beyond your imagination. When you choose faith consistently, you begin to see evidence of it everywhere. The phone call that came at the right time, the opportunity you weren't expecting, the strength that showed up when you thought you couldn't go any further. These are not coincidences. They are the fruits of faith. When you live by faith, you no longer live on edge. You're not tossed around by circumstances. You're rooted in something higher. You walk with confidence. You make decisions with boldness. You dream bigger. You give more. You love deeper, because you know that your life is not governed by what the world says is possible. It is governed by what God has already promised. And His promises are sure. His timing is perfect. His provision is unstoppable. To live by faith is to declare every single day, I may not see it yet, but I believe it's coming. I may not understand how, but I trust the who. I walk not by sight, but by faith, and that faith is leading me straight into divine abundance. That kind of faith doesn't just change your finances, it changes your entire life. So today, make the decision to walk by faith, not by sight, not by fear, not by limitation. Let your faith rise above what the world says is possible. Let it silence the voices of doubt and lack. Let it guide your actions, shape your words, and anchor your heart in truth. You are not at the mercy of the economy. You are not bound by your past. You are not disqualified by your current circumstances. You are connected to an unlimited source, and that source is faithful. Provision is not a matter of chance, it is a matter of trust. And when you place your full trust in God, the impossible becomes possible. The closed doors begin to open, and what once seemed distant begins to move toward you. Stand boldly, speak confidently, move expectantly. Because the moment you choose to live by faith is the moment heaven begins to move on your behalf. You're not waiting on God, He's waiting on your faith. Now go forward, not just hoping, but believing, not just dreaming, but expecting, not just surviving, but overflowing. Your supply is already in motion. Believe it, speak it, walk in it, and watch what God does next.